She accidentally sent a photo in her pajamas to the millionaire, and his reaction changed everything. Before we explore all the details of this incredible story, tell us where you're following us from and the time. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss a thing, and let's embark on this journey together. She knew she shouldn't be texting this late, but she couldn't help herself. Maeve Lewis adjusted her position on the plush velvet couch in her cozy Manhattan apartment, the soft glow of her phone screen illuminating her warm brown skin in the dim evening light. At 25, she had learned to treasure these quiet moments at the end of long workdays. Her natural hair was pulled back into a silk scarf, and she wore her favorite cotton pajama set, simple lavender, with tiny white stars scattered across the fabric. The 42nd floor of the Sterling Corporate Tower had been her second home for the past 2 years. As executive assistant to the CEO, Maeve had mastered the art of anticipating needs, organizing chaos, and maintaining the perfect balance between professional efficiency and warm approachability that made everyone in the office feel at ease. Everyone except him, Dominic Brown. Even thinking his name sent an involuntary flutter through her chest, something she'd been trying to ignore for months. At 36, he commanded every room he entered with an effortless authority that seemed almost magnetic. Tall and lean, with athletic shoulders that filled his tailored suits perfectly, Dominic had sharp green eyes that could assess a business proposal in seconds and dark hair that always looked impeccably styled, even after 14-hour days. His presence was intoxicating in a way that made Maeve forget her own carefully maintained professional boundaries. But he was her boss, the CEO, a billionaire who lived in a world she could only glimpse through scheduling his appointments and managing his calendar. And he was untouchable. Maeve had learned to keep their interactions brief and professional. "Good morning, Mr. Brown. Your 3 o'clock has been moved to 4. The quarterly reports are on your desk." She spoke to him in clipped, efficient sentences, never lingering too long in his corner office, with its floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park. Yet sometimes, just sometimes, she caught him watching her with an expression she couldn't quite decipher. A fleeting moment when his usual mask of corporate control seemed to slip, revealing something deeper underneath. But those moments passed so quickly that Maeve convinced herself she was imagining things. Her phone buzzed with a text from her mother. "How was work today, sweetheart? You've been putting in such long hours. Make sure you're taking care of yourself." Maeve smiled, her heart warming at her mother's concern. Patricia Lewis had raised her to be independent and strong, but she never stopped worrying about her daughter, navigating the fast-paced world of Manhattan corporate life. Without thinking, Maeve held up her phone and snapped a quick selfie, the kind of spontaneous, genuine photo she'd been sending her mother since college. Her smile was soft and unguarded, her natural beauty shining through without any makeup or artifice, just Maeve being herself, comfortable and real in her own space. She typed quickly, "Long day but good. Mr. Brown had back-to-back meetings until 8. Just got home and finally relaxing. Love you, Mum." Her finger hovered over the send button for just a moment, before pressing it decisively. The message was sent. Maeve set her phone aside and padded to the kitchen to make chamomile tea, humming softly to herself. Her apartment was small but carefully decorated, a mix of vintage finds from Brooklyn thrift stores and a few carefully chosen pieces that reflected her personal style. Warm earth tones, soft textures, and plenty of plants that thrived under her attentive care. She was just pouring hot water over her tea bag when her phone buzzed. Strange. Her mother usually didn't respond this quickly, especially this late. Maeve walked back to the couch and picked up her phone, expecting to see her mother's reply. Instead, her blood turned to ice. The contact name at the top of the screen read, Dominic Brown. Her message, the sweet, casual photo in her pajamas with the affectionate text about him, had been sent to her boss. Maeve stared at the screen in horror, her hands trembling as the full weight of her mistake crashed over her. She had just sent an intimate, personal photo to the most powerful man in her professional world, a man who valued precision, control, and absolute professionalism above all else. "Oh no, oh no, oh no," she whispered, sinking onto her couch as panic flooded her system. She quickly scrolled through her recent contacts, realizing with growing dread how the mistake had happened. Her mother's contact was listed as Mom Patricia, and it appeared right above Dominic Brown in her recent messages. In the dim light and her relaxed state, she must have accidentally selected the wrong contact. Maeve's mind raced through worst-case scenarios. Would he think she was unprofessional? Inappropriate? Would this be grounds for termination? She'd worked so hard to build her reputation, to prove herself capable and trustworthy in a competitive environment. But worse than the professional implications was the personal embarrassment. Dominic had seen her at her most natural, unguarded moment. No corporate armor, no careful presentation, just Maeve in pajamas, smiling the way she only did for people she loved. She stared at the photo, seeing herself through his eyes. Her dark brown skin glowed warmly in the soft light, her natural hair peeking out from beneath the silk scarf, her smile genuine and radiant. She looked beautiful, but that wasn't the point. The point was that she had just crossed a line she could never uncross. Her phone remained ominously silent. No response, no acknowledgement, nothing. Maeve clutched the device to her chest, her heart hammering as one thought echoed through her mind. Tomorrow morning she would have to face him, knowing that he had seen a piece of her soul she never intended to share, and she had absolutely no idea what she was going to say. Would you have made the same mistake in a moment of tired vulnerability? Sometimes the most life-changing moments begin with the smallest errors. She had practiced 17 different ways to apologize, but none of them felt right. Maeve stood in front of her bathroom mirror at 5:30 a.m., having given up on sleep hours ago. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, despite the concealer she'd carefully applied, and her hands still trembled slightly as she smoothed down her navy blue blazer. She'd chosen her most conservative outfit, a tailored suit that screamed professionalism, and absolutely nothing else. The subway ride to Manhattan felt eternal. Every jostle and screech of the rails seemed to mock her anxiety. She rehearsed potential conversations in her head, each one ending in disaster. Mr. Brown about last night's message? No, too direct. I owe you an explanation for the inappropriate text. Too formal. Please don't fire me for being an idiot. Definitely too honest. By the time she reached the sterling corporate tower, Maeve had worked herself into such a state that she nearly dropped her security badge twice while scanning into the building. The elevator ride to the 42nd floor stretched like a small eternity. The executive suite was still quiet at 7:15 a.m. Maeve had deliberately arrived early, hoping to settle herself before facing the inevitable confrontation. She busied herself organizing files that were already perfectly organized, checking emails that could wait, and brewing coffee with the kind of focused intensity usually reserved for performing surgery. At exactly 8 a.m., the elevator chimed. Maeve's heart stopped. Dominic Brown stepped onto the floor with his usual confident stride, looking impeccably put together in a charcoal grey suit that emphasized his broad shoulders. His dark hair was perfectly styled, and those penetrating green eyes that haunted her dreams were hidden behind his typical mask of professional composure. He paused at her desk, and Maeve braced herself for the worst. "Good morning, Maeve," he said, his voice carrying that familiar low, measured tone that always made her stomach flutter against her will. "Good morning, Mr. Brown," she managed, her voice only slightly higher than usual. She kept her eyes fixed on her computer screen, afraid to meet his gaze. "Coffee smells excellent this morning," he continued, seemingly unperturbed. "Could I trouble you for a cup?" Maeve blinked. This was normal. Completely, utterly normal. No mention of the photo, no uncomfortable acknowledgement. Nothing. "Of course," she said, rising quickly and nearly knocking over her stapler in the process. "How do you take it?" The question tumbled out before she could stop herself. She'd been making his coffee for 2 years and knew exactly how he liked it. Black, no sugar, in the blue ceramic mug his sister had given him for Christmas. Something flickered across Dominic's expression. Amusement, maybe, but it was gone so quickly she might have imagined it. "Black, no sugar," he said, his lips twitching almost imperceptibly. "In the blue mug, if you don't mind." As Maeve prepared his coffee with slightly shaky hands, she could feel him watching her. Not in the usual distracted way of a busy executive, but with a focused attention that made her skin tingle with awareness. "Here you go," she said, extending the mug carefully to avoid any accidental contact. Their fingers brushed as he took it. The touch was brief, barely a second, but electric. Maeve felt heat race up her arm and settle in her cheeks, and she was certain he must have felt it too, because his eyes seemed to darken for just a moment. "Thank you," he said, his voice slightly softer than before. "You know, I've been thinking—" Maeve's heart hammered. Here it came. The acknowledgement, the awkward conversation, possibly the termination. "We should review the Henderson proposal together this afternoon. Around 3? She stared at him, completely thrown. The Henderson proposal? Unless you have other commitments?" There was something in his tone she couldn't identify. Teasing, gentle. No commitments. 3 is perfect. Dominic nodded once, then headed toward his office. He paused at the doorway and turned back, catching her completely off guard. Maeve? Yes, Mr. Brown? For a moment, his carefully controlled expression seemed to crack, revealing something vulnerable underneath, something that made her breath catch. Thank you for the coffee. It's exactly how I like it. There was weight to those words that had nothing to do with coffee, and they both knew it. After he disappeared into his office, Maeve sank into her chair, her mind reeling. He hadn't mentioned the photo, hadn't acted weird or uncomfortable, but there had been something different in the way he looked at her, spoke to her, a warmth that hadn't been there before. The morning passed in a strange haze of normalcy, tinged with electric tension. Dominic conducted his usual meetings, made his usual calls, and maintained his usual professional demeanor. But every time he emerged from his office, Maeve felt his gaze linger on her just a moment longer than necessary. At lunch, her friend Carmen from accounting stopped by her desk. Girl, you look like you've seen a ghost, Carmen observed, perching on the edge of Marvy's desk. Everything okay? Maeve glanced toward Dominic's office, where she could see his silhouette through the frosted glass, then back at Carmen. Just a long night. Didn't sleep well. Carmen said knowingly. This wouldn't have anything to do with Mr. Tall, Dark and Brooding over there, would it? Carmen, Maeve hissed, glancing around nervously. What? I'm just saying, the man's been looking at you all morning, like you hung the moon. Even Johnson from legal noticed, and that man's blind as a bat without his glasses. Before Maeve could protest, Dominic's office door opened. Maeve, could I see you for a moment? Carmen raised an eyebrow and whispered, Go get him, Tiger, before sauntering away. Maeve smoothed her skirt and walked into his office, closing the door behind her as she always did. But this time, the click of the latch seemed impossibly loud. Dominic was standing by the window, his back to her, hands clasped behind him as he gazed out at the city below. The afternoon light streaming through the glass highlighted the strong line of his shoulders and the way his hair caught the sun. You wanted to see me about the Henderson proposal? She asked, proud of how steady her voice sounded. He turned slowly, and when their eyes met, Maeve felt the air shift between them. Actually, he said, his voice dropping to that low, intimate tone that made her knees weak, I wanted to talk to you about something else entirely. Maeve's mouth went dry. Here it was, the moment she'd been dreading all day. Dominic moved closer, each step deliberate and measured, until he was standing just close enough that she could smell his cologne, something expensive and masculine that made her head spin. Last night, he began, his green eyes never leaving hers, I received something unexpected, Mr. Brown. I can explain. A photo, he continued, as if she hadn't spoken. A beautiful, genuine smile that absolutely took my breath away. Maeve's words died in her throat. And I've been wondering all day, Dominic said, his voice barely above a whisper, if that smile was meant for me, or if I was just lucky enough to glimpse something precious that was never intended for my eyes. The question hung between them like a live wire, crackling with possibility and danger in equal measure. It wasn't meant for you. The words escaped Maeve's lips before she could stop them, honest and raw. But as soon as she saw the flicker of disappointment cross Dominic's features, she rushed to continue. I mean, it was supposed to go to my mother. It was just me being me. Nothing special. She wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly feeling exposed under his intense gaze. Dominic studied her for a long moment, his green eyes searching her face as if trying to decode a complex equation. When he spoke, his voice was soft but certain. You're wrong, Mr. Brown. Dominic, he corrected gently. When it's just us, call me Dominic. The intimacy of his first name on her tongue made her pulse race. Dominic, she whispered, testing how it felt. It felt dangerous. It felt right. He stepped closer, close enough that she could see the tiny flecks of gold in his green eyes, the slight shadow of stubble along his jawline. That photo, that smile, it was the most beautiful thing I've seen in years, he said, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. It was real, unguarded. It was you without any walls, without any pretense. And yes, maybe it wasn't meant for me, but I'm grateful it found its way to me anyway. Maeve's breath caught. We shouldn't be having this conversation. I know. His hand lifted as if to touch her face, then dropped to his side. But I can't stop thinking about it. About you. The confession hung in the air between them, loaded with possibility and consequence. Maeve felt as if she was standing on the edge of a cliff, wind whipping around her, one step away from free fall. "Dominic," she began, but the intercom on his desk buzzed, shattering the moment. "Mr. Brown?" His secretary's voice filled the room. "Your 3 o'clock is here early." Dominic closed his eyes briefly, jaw tightening with frustration. When he opened them again, his professional mask was sliding back into place, but not quickly enough to hide the regret in his expression. "Send them to conference room A," he said, his voice returning to its usual controlled tone. "I'll be there in 5 minutes." "Of course, sir." The intercom clicked off, leaving them in heavy silence. "Saved by the bell," Maeve said, attempting levity but failing to hide the shakiness in her voice. "Or cursed by it," Dominic murmured, then seemed to catch himself. He straightened, running a hand through his dark hair. We need to maintain professionalism." "Yes," Maeve agreed quickly, though her heart was screaming the opposite. "Absolutely. This was just a moment of confusion." But even as she said the words, she knew they were a lie. There was nothing confused about the way he'd looked at her, nothing uncertain about the electricity that crackled between them whenever they were in the same room. Dominic gathered his files for the meeting, his movements precise and controlled, but as he passed her on his way to the door, he paused. "Maeve." She looked up, and for just a second, his mask slipped again. "For what it's worth," he said quietly, "I hope you smile like that again, whether it's meant for me or not." After he left, Maeve remained standing in his office for several minutes, her legs unsteady and her mind reeling. The scent of his cologne lingered in the air, a reminder of how close they'd been, how easily she could have reached out and touched him. She forced herself to return to her desk, to focus on emails and phone calls and the mundane tasks that made up her workday. But concentration was impossible. Every time she heard his voice from the conference room, every time he passed her desk, her skin tingled with awareness. Around 4:30, Carmen appeared again, this time with 2 cups of coffee from the fancy place downstairs. "You look like you need this," she said, settling into the visitor's chair beside Maeve's desk. "You have no idea," Maeve muttered, accepting the coffee gratefully. "So," Carmen said, eyeing the closed conference room door where Dominic was still in his meeting, "want to tell me why you've been staring at your computer screen for 20 minutes without typing a single word?" Maeve glanced around to make sure they were alone, then leaned closer. "Can I ask you something? Hypothetically?" "Oh, this is going to be good," Carmen said, settling back with obvious delight. "If someone, hypothetically, developed feelings for someone they absolutely couldn't be with, what would you do?" Carmen's eyebrows shot up. "Hypothetically, I'd ask myself if these feelings were one-sided, or if there might be some mutual interest happening. And if there might be mutual interest, then I'd ask myself if I was brave enough to find out where it leads, or if I was going to spend the rest of my life wondering, what if?" Before Maeve could respond, the conference room door opened and Dominic emerged with 3 executives in expensive suits. He was in full CEO mode, confident, commanding, every inch the billionaire businessman who could make or break careers with a single decision. But as the executives filed past Maeve's desk, chatting among themselves, Dominic lingered. "The Peterson contracts need to be reviewed," he said, his voice professionally neutral. "Could you stay a bit late tonight to go over them with me?" It was a reasonable request. They often worked late together on important projects, but something in his tone, in the way his eyes held hers for just a moment longer than necessary, made her pulse quicken. "Of course," she managed. "Good. Around 7? The building should be quiet by then." After he disappeared back into his office, Carmen gave Maeve a knowing look. "Girl, that man just asked you to stay late when the building's empty." "That wasn't about contracts. It's work," Maeve protested weakly. "Uh-huh. And I'm the Queen of England." Carmen gathered her things to leave. "Just remember what I said about being brave enough to find out where it leads." As evening approached, and the office gradually emptied, Maeve found herself both anticipating and dreading 7 o'clock. She touched up her lipstick in the ladies' room, then immediately wiped it off, not wanting to seem like she was trying too hard. At exactly 7, she knocked on Dominic's office door. "Come in." He was standing by the window again, jacket off, sleeves rolled up, to reveal strong forearms. The sight of him looking slightly disheveled and more relaxed than usual made her mouth go dry. "The Peterson contracts," she said, holding up the folder. "Right, the contracts." He turned to face her, and she could see the conflict written across his features, the war between his professional obligations and whatever he was feeling. "We should probably get started," Maeve said, though she made no move to open the folder. Probably, he agreed, though he didn't move either. They stood there, the weight of unspoken words filling the space between them, both knowing that they were about to cross a line that couldn't be uncrossed. And in that moment, Marvy realized that Carmen was right. She was tired of wondering, what if? Dominic, she said softly, setting the folder aside. What are we doing? His answer was barely a whisper, but it changed everything. I have absolutely no idea, but I don't want to stop. The silence stretched between them like a taut wire, ready to snap. Maeve could hear her own heartbeat echoing in her ears as she watched Dominic's internal struggle play out across his features. The city lights twinkled beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting shifting shadows across his face, making him look both vulnerable and dangerously attractive. We should talk about the contracts, she said finally, though her voice lacked conviction. Should we? His green eyes never left hers as he moved closer, each step deliberate and measured. Because I'm finding it very difficult to concentrate on anything except the way you're looking at me right now. How am I looking at you? The question escaped before she could stop it. Like you're as torn as I am. Like you want something you know you shouldn't want. He stopped just close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from his body. Am I wrong? Maeve's breath hitched. She should say yes. She should grab the contracts, maintain her professional distance, and pretend that her entire world hadn't shifted the moment she accidentally sent him that photo. Instead, she whispered, No, you're not wrong. Something shifted in Dominic's expression, relief, desire, and something deeper that made her knees weak. Tell me to stop, he said softly, his hand rising to cup her cheek with infinite gentleness. Tell me this is a mistake, and I'll step back. We'll review contracts and pretend this conversation never happened. His thumb traced along her cheekbone, and Maeve felt herself melting into his touch, despite every rational thought screaming that this was dangerous territory. I can't, she admitted, her voice barely audible. I can't tell you to stop because I don't want you to. The confession hung between them for a heartbeat, before Dominic leaned down, his forehead resting against hers. You're going to be the end of me, Maeve Lewis, he murmured, his breath warm against her lips. Maybe you'll be the end of me too, she whispered back. The kiss, when it finally came, was nothing like she'd imagined during those secret moments when she'd allowed herself to wonder. It wasn't desperate or frantic. Instead, it was slow, deliberate, and so tender that it made her chest ache with emotion. His lips moved against hers with a reverence that spoke of weeks, maybe months, of suppressed longing. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing unsteadily. That was, Maeve began, then trailed off, unable to find words adequate for what had just happened. A terrible idea, Dominic finished, though his arms remained around her waist, holding her close. And the best thing that's happened to me in years. Maeve laughed softly, the sound somewhere between joy and hysteria. We're in so much trouble. Probably, he agreed, then surprised her by grinning. A real, genuine smile that transformed his entire face and made him look years younger. But I find myself not caring as much as I should. What happens now? She asked, the practical part of her brain finally kicking in. I mean, we work together. You're my boss. There are rules. I know. His thumb traced along her jaw, making it difficult to think clearly. Believe me, I've been running through every possible complication since last night. But Maeve, he paused, seeming to gather his thoughts. I've spent the last 10 years building walls around myself, being the perfect CEO, the controlled businessman who never lets emotion cloud judgment. And then you smiled at me through a phone screen, and every single one of those walls crumbled. The raw honesty in his voice made her heart skip. Dominic, I'm not asking you to make any decisions tonight, he said quickly. I just needed you to know that this, whatever this is, it's not just physical attraction. It's not just curiosity about something forbidden. You make me want to be more than just a man in an expensive suit, making deals and attending board meetings. Maeve stared up at him, seeing past the billionaire facade to the man underneath, lonely, driven, and suddenly so human, it took her breath away. What if we mess this up? She asked. What if we try and it ruins everything? I can't lose my job, Dominic. I can't afford to... Hey, he tilted her chin up, forcing her to meet his eyes. You will never lose your job because of this. Whatever happens between us personally, your position here is secure. I give you my word. The sincerity in his voice eased some of her panic, but she could still feel the weight of uncertainty pressing down on her. I need time to think, she said finally. Of course. He stepped back, giving her space, though she immediately missed his warmth. "Take all the time you need." Marvy gathered the contract folder from where she'd set it aside, her hands only slightly shaky. "Should we actually look at these Peterson contracts?" Dominic's laugh was soft and self-deprecating. "I think we both know my concentration is shot for the evening. Why don't we tackle them fresh tomorrow morning?" "Tomorrow morning," she agreed, then hesitated at his office door. "Dominic? Yes? For what it's worth, you've been more than just a man in an expensive suit for a while now. At least to me." The smile that spread across his face was radiant. "Thank you for that." The elevator ride down felt surreal, as if she were floating rather than descending 42 floors. Maeve caught her reflection in the polished metal doors and barely recognized herself. Her lips were slightly swollen from their kiss, her eyes bright with an emotion she wasn't ready to name, and there was a glow about her that hadn't been there that morning. Her phone buzzed as the elevator reached the lobby. "I know I said take your time, but I'm already hoping you don't take too long." Despite everything, the complications, the risks, the uncertainty, Maeve found herself smiling as she typed back. "Some decisions are easier than others. M." His response came immediately. "Are you saying what I hope you're saying?" Maeve stepped out into the cool evening air, the city alive with lights and possibilities around her. For the first time in her life, she felt brave enough to leap without knowing exactly where she'd land. "I'm saying I don't want to wonder what if for the rest of my life, but we do this right. Slow, careful, no rushing. Slow and careful I can do. But Maeve, yes, I'm already falling for you, just so you know what you're getting into." As Maeve walked toward the subway, her heart pounding with equal parts terror and exhilaration, she realized that Carmen had been right about being brave enough to find out where feelings could lead. She was about to find out exactly where her heart was brave enough to take her, and for the first time in her carefully planned life, she was okay with not knowing the destination. 3 days of stolen glances and careful professionalism had nearly driven them both insane. Marvy sat at her desk Friday afternoon, pretending to review vendor contracts while actually watching Dominic through his office's glass walls. He was on a conference call with investors in Tokyo, his posture commanding and confident as he gestured to emphasize a point. But every few minutes, his eyes would find hers through the glass, and the intensity of his gaze would make her forget how to breathe. They had been scrupulously professional since their kiss Tuesday evening. No lingering touches when he handed her files, no whispered conversations that could be misconstrued. To any outside observer, they were simply boss and assistant maintaining appropriate boundaries. But the tension between them was electric, crackling beneath every mundane interaction. "Good morning, Mr. Brown. Your coffee?" "Thank you, Maeve. Could you reschedule my 2 o'clock? Of course, the Henderson files are on your desk." "Perfect, as always." Surface level, everything was normal, but underneath, there were layers of meaning in every exchange. The way he said her name like he was savoring it, the way she found excuses to enter his office just to be in the same space, the carefully neutral expressions that couldn't quite hide the want in their eyes. Maeve's phone buzzed with a text. "Dinner tonight? Somewhere we can actually talk without pretending we're just colleagues. D." Her pulse quickened. They had been texting sporadically since Tuesday. Nothing inappropriate, just gentle check-ins that felt more intimate than they should have. Good morning messages that made her smile over her coffee. Brief exchanges about work that somehow turned into conversations about favorite books and childhood memories. She glanced up to find him watching her through his office window, phone in hand, waiting for her response. "Are you asking me on a date, Mr. Brown?" "I'm asking a beautiful, intelligent woman if she'd like to have dinner with a man who hasn't been able to think about anything else but her smile for 4 days straight." Maeve's cheeks warmed as she typed back. "When you put it like that, yes, but somewhere quiet. I'm not ready for the entire corporate world to speculate about us. I know just the place. Meet me downstairs at 7? It's a date, literally." When Dominic's call ended 20 minutes later, he emerged from his office with a barely contained smile that made several passing employees do double takes. The famously serious CEO looked happy, genuinely, openly happy in a way none of them had ever seen. "Any urgent messages?" he asked, stopping at Maeve's desk with studied casualness. "Nothing that can't wait until Monday," she replied, then lowered her voice. "Are you sure about tonight? Once we do this, there's no going back to just being boss and assistant." His expression grew serious. "Are you having second thoughts?" "No," she said quickly, then paused. "Maybe. Not about you. Just about everything else, the complications." Dominic glanced around the office, noting the Friday afternoon exodus of employees heading home early for the weekend. When he was satisfied they weren't being observed, he leaned slightly closer. "Maeve, I've been thinking about those complications too, about company policies and professional boundaries, and all the very logical reasons why this is inadvisable." His voice dropped to that low, intimate tone that made her stomach flutter. "And then I remember how it felt to kiss you, and suddenly none of those reasons seem important anymore." "Dominic," she whispered, acutely aware that anyone could walk by. "I know the risks," he continued, "but I also know that I haven't felt this alive in years. You make me want to be the kind of man who takes chances on beautiful, impossible things." Before Maeve could respond, Carmen's voice rang out across the office. "Maeve, girl, you coming to happy hour with us?" Dominic straightened smoothly, his professional mask sliding back into place just as Carmen approached with 2 other assistants in tow. "Sorry, Carmen," Maeve said, proud of how steady her voice sounded. "I have plans tonight." "Oh?" Carmen's eyes darted between Maeve and Dominic with obvious curiosity. "Anything exciting?" "Just dinner with a friend," Maeve replied carefully. "Must be some friend to make you skip margaritas," Carmen teased, then turned to Dominic. "Working late again tonight, Mr. Brown?" "Actually, I'm leaving early today," he said with that enigmatic smile that revealed nothing. "Some things are more important than work." After the trio left, giggling about weekend plans, Dominic and Maeve found themselves alone in the gradually emptying office. 7 o'clock, he said quietly. 7 o'clock, she confirmed. At exactly 7, Maeve stepped off the elevator in the lobby to find Dominic waiting by the security desk, no longer in his work attire. He wore dark jeans that fit him perfectly, a navy button-down with sleeves rolled to his forearms, and a leather jacket that made him look less like a CEO and more like a dangerously attractive man asking her on a date. "You look," he began, his eyes taking in her carefully chosen outfit, a flowing emerald dress that brought out the warmth in her skin, paired with a denim jacket and ankle boots that struck the perfect balance between elegant and approachable. "Different," she finished with a smile. "So do you. I like this version of you. This is who I am when I'm not trying to intimidate board members," he said, offering her his arm. "Hope you're not disappointed. Not even close." He led her to a sleek black car, not the corporate town car with driver she'd expected, but a modest sedan he drove himself. "Where are we going?" she asked, as they pulled into Manhattan traffic. "Little place in Brooklyn I discovered a few months ago. Family-owned, incredible food, and completely off the radar of anyone from our world." The drive across the Brooklyn Bridge was filled with easy conversation about everything except work. Maeve learned that Dominic had taught himself to cook during business school, that he'd traveled to 43 countries but never taken a vacation longer than 4 days, and that he'd been reading the same novel for 6 months because he only allowed himself a few pages before bed. "What about you?" he asked as they found parking in a quiet neighborhood lined with brownstones. "What does Maeve Lewis do when she's not keeping my life organized?" "I read everything I can get my hands on. I try new recipes that usually turn out terrible. I call my mom every Sunday and listen to her worry about me living in the big city." She paused. "I take long walks through different neighborhoods and pretend I'm brave enough to live in all the places I explore." "You are brave," Dominic said seriously as they walked toward a small restaurant with warm light spilling from its windows. "Braver than you think." The restaurant was everything he'd promised. Intimate, authentic, and blessedly anonymous. They were seated at a corner table where soft jazz played and candles flickered between them. "This feels very," Maeve began. "Like a real date," Dominic finished. "Like we're normal people getting to know each other instead of boss and assistant, tiptoeing around company policy." Their server, an elderly Italian woman who clearly adored Dominic, fussed over them both and insisted they try the special pasta. As they waited for their food, the conversation flowed as easily as the wine Dominic had ordered. "Tell me something about yourself that I don't know," Maeve said, leaning forward slightly. "I have a confession," he said, his eyes twinkling with mischief. "That morning after you sent the photo, I stared at it for about 10 minutes before I could even process what had happened." "Dominic!" Maeve laughed, her cheeks warming. "I'm serious. It was like seeing sunshine after months of grey skies. I realized I'd been so focused on work, on building the company, that I'd forgotten what it felt like to see something that made me happy just because it existed." The honesty in his voice made her chest tight with emotion. That's beautiful. Your turn. Tell me something I don't know." Maeve took a sip of wine, gathering courage. "I've had a crush on you for months. Not just because you're attractive, though you definitely are, but because of the way you remember everyone's names, even the night cleaning crew. The way you say thank you for everything, no matter how small. The way you get this little line between your eyebrows when you're concentrating really hard on solving a problem. You noticed all that. I notice everything about you, she admitted. It's embarrassing how much I notice. Dominic reached across the table and covered her hand with his. It's not embarrassing. It's wonderful. I've been so careful to keep everyone at arm's length that I forgot how good it feels to be truly seen by someone. Their food arrived, but neither seemed particularly interested in eating. They were too busy discovering each other, sharing stories, laughing at shared observations about their colleagues, and marveling at how easy it was to talk when they weren't worried about maintaining professional distance. "Can I ask you something potentially awkward?" Maeve said as they shared a piece of tiramisu. "Shoot. What happens Monday morning? Do we go back to pretending we're just boss and assistant?" Dominic was quiet for a moment, his thumb tracing circles on the back of her hand. "I don't think I can pretend anymore," he said finally, "but I also don't want to put you in an uncomfortable position. Whatever we decide, it has to work for both of us. What if we just see what happens? Take it slow, keep things private for now, and figure it out as we go. You'd be okay with that, the secrecy, the complications?" Maeve looked into his green eyes, seeing hope and vulnerability in equal measure, and realized that somewhere between Tuesday's accidental photo and tonight's perfect first date, she'd stopped thinking of this as a terrible idea and started thinking of it as the best thing that had ever happened to her. "For you," she said softly, "I think I'm okay with a lot of things I never thought I'd be okay with." The smile that spread across his face was radiant. "In that case, Maeve Lewis, would you like to start figuring it out together?" "Yes," she said without hesitation. "Yes, I would." Monday morning arrived with unexpected challenges. Maeve stood in front of her bathroom mirror, changing her outfit for the third time. How exactly did one dress for work when your boss had become... what exactly? Her boyfriend? Her secret romance? The man who had walked her to her door Friday night and kissed her so sweetly that she'd barely slept since? She settled on a navy wrap dress that was professional, yet flattering, paired with her lucky pearl earrings, a graduation gift from her mother. As she applied her lipstick, her phone buzzed. "Good morning, beautiful. Ready for our first day of professional acting? D." Despite her nerves, Maeve smiled, as ready as someone can be for pretending she doesn't want to kiss her boss the moment she sees him. "You're not making this easier. See you soon. D." The subway ride felt longer than usual, filled with a mixture of anticipation and anxiety. What if they couldn't pull this off? What if their chemistry was too obvious? What if... "Girl, you're glowing," Carmen observed the moment Maeve walked onto the executive floor. "Did you have a good weekend?" "Just relaxing," Maeve replied carefully, though she could feel heat creeping up her neck. That must have been some relaxation." Before Maeve could respond, the elevator chimed and Dominic stepped out. He looked impeccable as always in a charcoal suit, but when his eyes found hers across the reception area, she saw the slight softening of his expression that was meant only for her. "Good morning, Maeve," he said, his voice perfectly professional. "Could I see you in my office to review today's schedule?" "Of course, Mr. Brown." But as she followed him into his office, she caught Carmen's knowing look and realized they might not be as subtle as they thought. "Close the door," Dominic said once they were inside. The moment the latch clicked, his professional mask dropped. He turned to face her, and the heat in his eyes made her pulse race. "I missed you," he said simply. "It's been 2 days," Maeve laughed, though she'd missed him too, more than was probably healthy. "Longest 2 days of my life." He moved closer, stopping just close enough that she could smell his cologne. "How are we supposed to get any work done when all I can think about is kissing you? We're supposed to be professional, remember?" But even as she said it, she found herself leaning toward him. Right. Professional. His eyes dropped to her lips. Completely professional and appropriate, and a sharp knock on the door made them both jump apart. "Mr. Brown?" Carmen's voice called through the wood. "Your 9 o'clock is here early." Dominic closed his eyes briefly, jaw tightening with frustration. "Of course they are," he muttered, then raised his voice. "Send them to conference room B. I'll be right there." "Will do." When they heard Carmen's footsteps retreat, Maeve couldn't help but giggle. "This is going to be harder than we thought." "Much harder," Dominic agreed, then caught himself. "I meant more difficult. The situation, not..." "Never mind." Maeve's laughter bubbled over. "Did the great Dominic Brown just get flustered?" "You're going to be the death of me," he said, but he was smiling. "Tonight, dinner at my place? I'll cook." "You cook?" "I'm full of surprises, Maeve Lewis." The next few hours passed in a blur of meetings, phone calls, and stolen glances. Every time Dominic emerged from his office, Maeve felt her stomach flip. When he handed her files, their fingers would brush for just a moment longer than necessary. When he dictated emails, his voice would drop to that low, intimate tone that made her think of their dinner conversation. Around noon, things got complicated. "Maeve, honey." Maeve looked up from her computer to see her mother approaching the reception desk, looking elegant in a cream-colored blazer and carrying a small gift bag. "Mom!" Maeve jumped up, genuinely delighted but also panicked. "What are you doing here?" "I had a doctor's appointment nearby and thought I'd surprise you with lunch," Patricia Lewis said, enveloping her daughter in a warm hug. "I brought sandwiches from that deli you love." "That's so sweet, but is this your mother?" Maeve turned to find Dominic standing behind them, having emerged from his office at the sound of voices. His expression was politely interested, but she could see the curiosity in his eyes. "Mum, this is Mr. Brown, my boss." "Mr. Brown, this is my mother, Patricia Lewis." "Mrs. Lewis," Dominic said, extending his hand with a warm smile. "It's a pleasure to meet you. Maeve speaks of you often." "Does she?" Patricia shook his hand, clearly charmed. "She's mentioned you as well, says you're a wonderful boss." "I'm the lucky one," Dominic replied, his eyes finding Maeve's briefly. "Your daughter is exceptional at what she does." Maeve felt heat creep up her neck at the double meaning in his words. "Would you like to join us for lunch, Mr. Brown?" Patricia asked, much to Maeve's horror. "I brought plenty." "That's very kind of you, but I couldn't intrude on your time with Maeve." "Nonsense, I insist. Besides, I'd love to hear more about how much you appreciate my daughter's talents." Maeve nearly choked. "Mom, Mr. Brown is very busy." "Actually," Dominic said, his eyes twinkling with mischief, "I was just thinking I could use a break. If you're sure I wouldn't be imposing." And that's how Maeve found herself sitting in the small break room with her mother and her secret, whatever Dominic was, eating turkey sandwiches and watching her two worlds collide in the most surreal way possible. "So tell me, Mr. Brown," Patricia said, delicately peeling the crust off her sandwich, "are you married?" "Mom," Maeve protested. "What? I'm just making conversation." "A man this handsome and successful, surely some lucky woman has snatched you up." Dominic's smile was perfectly innocent. "No, Mrs. Lewis, I haven't found the right woman yet, though recently I've begun to think that might be changing." His eyes met Maeve's across the small table, and she felt her heart skip several beats. "Oh, how wonderful!" Patricia clapped her hands together. "Is she someone special?" "Very special," Dominic said softly, still looking at Maeve. "Beautiful, intelligent, kind, the sort of woman who makes a man want to be better than he is." "She sounds perfect for you," Patricia said warmly. "When do we get to meet her?" "Soon, I hope," Dominic replied. "When the timing is right." Maeve was fairly certain she was going to spontaneously combust from the tension of this conversation. "Well," Patricia said, gathering her things as lunch wound down, "I should let you both get back to work. Thank you for joining us, Mr. Brown. It was lovely getting to know you." "The pleasure was all mine, Mrs. Lewis." After Patricia left with promises to call later, Maeve and Dominic found themselves alone in the break room. "That was," Maeve began. "Torture," Dominic finished. "Beautiful, wonderful torture. Your mother is lovely, by the way. She likes you. A lot. Which is dangerous because she's going to want to know everything about your mysterious new woman. Then I guess we'd better figure out when I can tell her the truth." The implication of his words, that this was serious enough to involve family, made Maeve's breath catch. "Dominic, too fast?" he asked, suddenly looking uncertain. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to presume." "No," she said quickly, stepping closer. "Not too fast, just overwhelming in the best possible way." The relief on his face was palpable. "Good, because I have to tell you, watching you with your mother, seeing how much she loves you, and how much you love her, it just made me want this even more." "Want what?" "You. This. Whatever we're building together." His hand found hers, fingers intertwining. A real relationship, not just stolen moments and secret texts. Before Maeve could respond, footsteps echoed in the hallway outside the break room. They sprang apart just as Carmen appeared in the doorway. "There you are, Mr. Brown. Your 2 o'clock has been waiting for—" Carmen stopped, her sharp eyes taking in their slightly flushed faces and the way they were standing just a bit too close. "Am I interrupting something?" "Just discussing scheduling conflicts," Dominic said smoothly, but Maeve could see the tension in his shoulders. "Uh-huh," Carmen said slowly, her gaze moving between them. "Well, Your meeting is in conference room A whenever you're ready." After Carmen left, Maeve and Dominic looked at each other with a mixture of guilt and amusement. "She knows," Maeve said. "She definitely knows," Dominic agreed. "What do we do? We trust that Carmen cares about you enough to keep her suspicions to herself, and we get better at this whole secret relationship thing. Any suggestions on how?" Dominic's smile was pure mischief. "Practice. Lots and lots of practice." As they headed back to work, Maeve couldn't help but think that if this was what practicing felt like, she was going to need all the self-control she could muster to survive the learning curve. But looking at Dominic's profile as he walked beside her, she realized that some things were worth the challenge. The elevator to Dominic's penthouse seemed to take forever. Maeve clutched a bottle of wine and tried to calm her nerves as the numbers climbed higher. 47, 48, 49. This was their third official date, but their first time at his place. The intimacy of the setting felt significant, like they were crossing another invisible line in their careful progression. When the doors opened directly into his apartment, Maeve's breath caught. "Wow," she whispered, stepping into a space that was both luxurious and surprisingly warm. Floor-to-ceiling windows showcased a breathtaking view of Manhattan, but the furniture was comfortable rather than ostentatious. Books lined built-in shelves, and soft jazz played from hidden speakers. "You look beautiful," Dominic said, appearing from what she assumed was the kitchen. He'd changed from his work attire into dark jeans and a soft grey sweater that made his green eyes even more striking. "This place is incredible," Maeve said, still taking it all in. "It's not what I expected." "What did you expect? Chrome and leather and coldly impressive furniture?" "Maybe," she admitted with a laugh, "but this feels like a home." "That's what I was going for." He moved closer, taking the wine from her hands. "I wanted you to feel comfortable here." The way he said it, like her comfort in his space mattered deeply to him, made her heart flutter. "Something smells amazing," she said, following him toward the kitchen. "Risotto with roasted vegetables. I promised you I could cook." "I'm impressed, and a little suspicious. Are you sure you didn't order this from some fancy restaurant?" Dominic laughed, stirring something on the stove with practiced ease. "Watch and learn, doubter." As he cooked, they fell into easy conversation about their days, their weeks, the small observations about their colleagues that they'd been saving up to share with each other. Maeve perched on a bar stool at the kitchen island, watching him move with surprising confidence around the kitchen. "You really do know what you're doing," she said, impressed despite herself. "Business school survival skill," he explained, tasting the risotto and adjusting seasoning. "I got tired of surviving on takeout and cereal, plus cooking is meditative. It's one of the few times my brain actually stops running through profit margins and merger strategies. What else helps you relax?" He paused in his stirring, considering. "You," he said simply. "Being with you is the most relaxed I've felt in years." The confession was delivered so matter-of-factly that it took Maeve a moment to process the weight of it. "Dominic, too intense?" He glanced over with a self-deprecating smile. "I'm still learning how to do this. The relationship thing, it's been a while." "How long is a while?" 3 years, maybe 4. He plated their food with careful precision. "I dated someone seriously in my early 30s. Sarah. She was smart, accomplished, came from the right kind of family. On paper, we were perfect together." Maeve felt a small stab of something that might have been jealousy. "What happened?" "She wanted the lifestyle that came with dating a CEO more than she wanted me. The galas, the expensive dinners, the status. When I realized that she was more excited about being seen with me than actually being with me," he shrugged. "It ended. That must have hurt." "It did. But looking back, I think I was more hurt by the principle than by losing her specifically. Does that make sense?" Maeve nodded. "It makes perfect sense. You wanted to be loved for who you are, not what you represent." "Exactly." He set their plates on the small dining table by the windows and lit 2 candles. "With you, it's different. You knew me as your boss before you knew about the money, the lifestyle. You've seen me stressed, frustrated, working 14-hour days. And somehow you still what? Still look at me like I'm worth looking at." The vulnerability in his voice made her chest ache. She reached across the table and covered his hand with hers. "You are worth looking at, Dominic. You're worth a lot more than looking at." They ate slowly, savoring both the food and the conversation. The risotto was perfect, creamy and rich with just the right amount of bite from the vegetables. But Maeve found herself more focused on watching Dominic relax into this version of himself, the one that existed outside boardrooms and corporate expectations. "Your turn," he said, as they shared a piece of chocolate tart he'd apparently made from scratch. "Tell me about your last serious relationship," Maeve groaned. "Do I have to? Fair's fair. I showed you my emotional baggage." "Fine. His name was Marcus. We dated for 2 years, lived together for 1. I thought we were building something real. What happened? He got a job offer in Seattle, a good one, the kind of opportunity you don't pass up. I was excited for him, started looking into transferring my own career, but when I brought it up, he just stared at me, like it had never occurred to him that I might want to be part of his new life. Oh, Maeve. He said he thought a fresh start would be good for both of us, that we'd grown apart. But what he really meant was that I wasn't important enough to factor into his major life decisions." She stabbed at her tart with more force than necessary. "So he left, and I pretended it didn't devastate me. How long ago was this? 8 months, right before I started working for you, actually. I threw myself into the job because it was easier than dealing with the fact that someone I loved could just walk away like I didn't matter." Dominic was quiet for a long moment, his green eyes serious as he studied her face. "Marcus was an idiot," he said finally. "You're required to say that." "No, I'm not. I'm saying it because it's true. Anyone who could walk away from you, anyone who could treat your love like it was disposable, is either an idiot or blind. Probably both." The fierce conviction in his voice made her throat tight with emotion. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what?" "For making me feel like I matter. Like my feelings and opinions and presence in your life actually mean something." Dominic stood and moved around the table, pulling her to her feet and into his arms. "Maeve Lewis," he said, his hands cupping her face with infinite gentleness. "You don't just matter, you've become essential. These past few weeks with you, so it's like I've been living in black and white my whole life, and suddenly everything is in color." When he kissed her this time, it was different from their previous kisses. Deeper, more certain, filled with emotion that went beyond physical attraction. Maeve melted into him, her hands fisting in his sweater as she poured all her gratitude and growing feelings into the connection between them. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing unsteadily. "Stay," Dominic said softly, his forehead resting against hers. "Not for just stay. Let me hold you. Let me wake up knowing you're here." The request was so simple and so intimate that it made her heart race for entirely different reasons. "Are you sure?" "I've never been more sure of anything in my life." An hour later, they lay curled together on his massive couch, watching the city lights twinkle beyond the windows. Maeve wore one of his t-shirts and Dominic had changed into pajama pants and a soft Henley. They talked for hours about everything and nothing. Childhood memories, secret dreams, embarrassing moments, favorite movies. "Can I tell you something?" Maeve said, her head resting on his chest, listening to the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. "Always. I'm falling in love with you." She felt his body tense beneath her, and for a terrifying moment, she wondered if she'd said too much too soon. Then his arms tightened around her, and she heard him release a shaky breath. "Thank God," he whispered into her hair, "because I'm already gone, completely, utterly, hopelessly in love with you." As they held each other in the soft glow of the city lights, Maeve realized that sometimes the scariest words were also the most necessary ones. Sometimes love required the courage to be vulnerable, to risk everything for the possibility of something beautiful. And sometimes when you found the right person, the risk stopped feeling like a risk and started feeling like coming home. "Dominic? Tomorrow at work is going to be very difficult." His laugh rumbled through his chest. "Impossible, more like. How am I supposed to sit through board meetings when all I'll be thinking about is this? About you." "We'll figure it out," she said, pressing a soft kiss to his chest. "We'll figure it all out." And in that moment, surrounded by his warmth and the certainty of their feelings, Maeve believed they really would. The morning after should have been perfect, but nothing was ever that simple. Maeve woke up wrapped in Dominic's arms, sunlight streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows of his bedroom. For a blissful moment, she simply lay there, listening to his steady breathing and marveling at how right this felt. Then reality crashed in. She was going to be late for work. They were going to arrive together. People would notice. "Dominic," she whispered, gently shaking his shoulder, "we need to wake up." His arms tightened around her instinctively before his eyes fluttered open. When he saw her face, his smile was sleepy and completely content. "Good morning, beautiful," he murmured, pressing a soft kiss to her forehead. "Good morning, but we have a problem. It's 7:30. That got his attention. Dominic sat up quickly, running a hand through his rumpled hair. Shit. We never set an alarm. I need to go home and change before work, and we definitely can't arrive together. Right. Of course. But he looked disappointed, as the logistics of their secret relationship reasserted themselves. As Marvi hurried to get dressed, Dominic called his driver to take her home, then arranged for a different car to bring him to the office an hour later. They had learned to be strategic about their timing, but this morning felt rushed and somehow wrong after the intimacy they'd shared. "I'll see you at work," Maeve said, straightening her dress from the previous evening. "Maeve, wait." Dominic caught her hand, pulling her back for one more kiss. "Last night was perfect," she finished softly. "I love you," he said, the words still new enough to make her heart skip. "I love you too." An hour later, Maeve rushed into the office, having barely managed to shower, change and grab coffee on her way in. She was organizing her desk when Carmen appeared with a knowing smirk. "Well, well, well, someone had quite the evening." "I don't know what you mean," Maeve said, not meeting her friend's eyes. "Girl, you're glowing like a Christmas tree. And unless my eyes are deceiving me, that's a hickey you're trying to hide with concealer." Maeve's hand flew to her neck. She'd been so rushed that morning that she'd barely looked in the mirror. "Carmen, plus Mr. Tall, Dark and Brooding just walked in looking more relaxed than I've ever seen him, and he's wearing different cufflinks than yesterday." Maeve's stomach dropped. "You noticed his cufflinks?" "Honey, I notice everything. The question is, when are you going to trust me enough to tell me what's really going on?" Before Maeve could respond, Dominic's voice carried across the office. "Maeve, could I see you for a moment?" As she walked toward his office, she could feel Carmen's curious gaze following her. This was getting dangerous. "Close the door," Dominic said once she was inside. The moment the latch clicked, he pulled her into his arms, kissing her with an intensity that made her knees weak. "I missed you," he murmured against her lips. "The 45 minutes since you left felt like hours." "Dominic, we can't," she said, even as she melted into his embrace. "Carmen is already suspicious and—" A sharp knock interrupted them. They sprang apart just as the door opened without waiting for permission. "Mr. Brown, I need to discuss the Morrison acquisition." The voice belonged to James Patterson, the company's vice president of operations. He stopped mid-sentence, his sharp eyes taking in their flushed faces and the way they were standing just a bit too close. "I'm sorry," James said slowly, his expression carefully neutral. "I thought I heard you say come in." "No problem, James," Dominic replied smoothly, moving behind his desk to create distance. "Maeve was just updating me on today's schedule. What can I do for you?" As James launched into discussion about the acquisition, Maeve excused herself, but not before catching the calculating look in the VP's eyes. James Patterson was ambitious, political, and had been with the company long enough to know exactly how valuable information could be. The rest of the morning passed in a blur of tension. Every interaction with Dominic felt fraught with the possibility of discovery. When he handed her files, she was careful not to let their fingers touch. When she delivered messages, she kept her voice professionally neutral, but the effort was exhausting. Around noon, things got worse. "Maeve!" Her mother's voice rang out across the reception area. Again. This time, Patricia Lewis wasn't alone. She was accompanied by a woman about her age, elegant, well-dressed, with shrewd eyes that seemed to take in everything. "Mom," Maeve said, genuinely confused. "What are you doing here?" "I was having lunch with my dear friend Caroline Hammond, and I couldn't resist stopping by to show off my accomplished daughter." Patricia beamed with maternal pride. "Caroline, this is my Maeve. Maeve, this is Mrs. Hammond." The name was familiar, but Maeve couldn't place it until the woman spoke. "How lovely to meet you, dear. Your mother speaks of you constantly." Caroline's voice was cultured with the kind of refined accent that spoke of old money and social connections. "I understand you work for Dominic Brown." "Yes, ma'am. I'm his executive assistant." "How interesting. Dominic is practically family. His mother and I are very close friends. I've known him since he was a boy." Maeve's stomach dropped. This was getting complicated very quickly. "Is he in?" Caroline continued. "I'd love to say hello." Before Maeve could formulate a response, Dominic's office door opened. He emerged looking every inch the polished CEO, but when he saw the small group by Maeve's desk, something flickered across his expression. "Mrs. Hammond," he said, his smile warm but careful. "What a pleasant surprise." "Dominic, darling." Caroline moved forward to embrace him like the family friend she clearly was. "You look wonderful. Your mother told me you've been working too hard. You know how it is." The company keeps me busy. His eyes found Mavy's briefly, and she saw the caution there. I was just meeting your assistant. Such a lovely young woman. Her mother and I are old friends. Are you? Dominic's voice was perfectly polite, but Mavy caught the slight tightening around his eyes. Yes, Patricia was just telling me how much Mavy enjoys working here, how much she admires her boss. Caroline's tone was innocent, but there was something probing in her gaze as it moved between Dominic and Mavy. Mavy is exceptional at what she does, Dominic replied carefully. I'm sure she is. You know, Patricia was just mentioning that Mavy has been much happier lately. Practically glowing, she said. The benefits of loving your work, I suppose. The conversation felt like a minefield. Every word seemed loaded with potential meaning, and Marvy could see Dominic struggling to navigate the social complexities of Mrs. Hammond's probing questions. Well, Patricia said, oblivious to the undercurrents, we should let you get back to work. Caroline, shall we continue our lunch? Of course, Dominic, you must come to dinner soon. Your mother would be delighted, and I'd love to catch up properly. I'll check my schedule, he replied diplomatically. After the two women left, Mavy and Dominic stood in the reception area, both acutely aware of the curious glances from other employees who had witnessed the interaction. My office, Dominic said quietly. Now, once they were alone with the door closed, Dominic ran both hands through his hair. This is becoming a problem, he said. You think Mrs. Hammond suspects something? Carolyn Hammond doesn't suspect. She knows. That woman has been orchestrating social dynamics for 40 years. She missed nothing about how we looked at each other, how we spoke to each other. What does that mean for us? It means we need to be more careful. Caroline is connected to everyone in New York society, including my mother. If she starts talking, the implications hung heavy between them. Mavy sank into the chair across from his desk. Maybe we should cool things down for a while, she said quietly. Put some distance between us until... No. Dominic's response was immediate and firm. I'm not walking away from this, from us. We just need to be smarter. How much smarter can we be? James Patterson walked in on us almost kissing. Carmen knows something's up. Your mother's friend is suspicious. How long before... Before what? Before someone forces us to choose between our careers and our relationship? The raw pain in his voice stopped her protest cold. I won't let that happen, Mavy. I won't let anyone take this away from us. And if they try? Dominic moved around his desk, kneeling beside her chair and taking her hands in his. Then we'll face it together. But I'm not giving up on us because other people might disapprove. Are you? Looking into his determined green eyes, seeing the fierce protectiveness there, Mavy felt her resolve strengthen. No, she said firmly. I'm not giving up either. Good. Then we figure this out. Together. But as they held each other in his office, both knew that the careful bubble they'd built around their relationship was starting to show cracks. And sooner or later, something was going to give. The only question was whether they'd be strong enough to survive the fallout. 2 weeks of walking on eggshells finally came to a head on a Thursday that started like any other. Mavy arrived at work early, as had become her habit since the Caroline Hammond incident. The fewer people around when she and Dominic had to interact, the easier it was to maintain their professional facades, but the strain was showing on both of them. Their stolen moments had become fewer and more precious. Quick texts throughout the day, brief touches when passing files, the occasional late evening in his office that felt more like a lifeline than romance. They were both exhausted from the constant performance, but neither willing to admit defeat. She was organizing Dominic's calendar when Carmen approached with 2 cups of coffee and a determined expression. Okay, that's it, Carmen said, setting 1 cup on Mavy's desk and settling into the visitor's chair. We're talking, now. Carmen, I really don't have time. Girl, you look like you haven't slept in a week. You're jumpy, distracted, and yesterday I watched you stare at your computer screen for 10 minutes without typing a single word. Carmen leaned forward, her voice gentle but firm. I'm worried about you. Mavy felt her careful composure cracking. I'm fine, just tired. This is about him, isn't it? Carmen glanced toward Dominic's office, where they could see his silhouette through the frosted glass. About Mr. Brown. I don't know what you mean. Mavy. Carmen's voice was soft but insistent. We've been friends for 2 years. I know when you're lying to me. And, honey, whatever's going on between you two, it's eating you alive. Before Mavy could respond, the elevator chimed. James Patterson stepped out, looking unusually serious and carrying a manila folder. He nodded curtly at Carmen and Mavy, before heading straight to Dominic's office. He looks like he's about to deliver bad news, Carmen observed. Through the glass walls, they watched James enter Dominic's office and close the door. Even with the frosted glass obscuring details, they could see the tension in both men's postures as they spoke. "Maybe I should—" Maeve started to rise, but Carmen caught her arm. "Whatever that is, it's not assistant business. Look at their body language." Carmen was right. This wasn't a typical business meeting. James was leaning forward aggressively, gesturing emphatically. Dominic was standing rigid behind his desk, his jaw tight with what looked like barely controlled anger. The meeting lasted exactly 12 minutes. When James emerged, his expression was coldly satisfied. He paused at Maeve's desk. "Miss Lewis," he said with false pleasantness, "Mr. Brown would like to see you." Immediately. After he left, Carmen grabbed Maeve's hand. "Whatever just happened in there, remember that I'm your friend. Whatever you need, okay?" Maeve nodded, though dread was pooling in her stomach as she walked toward Dominic's office. She knocked softly and entered to find him standing at the window, his back to her, shoulders rigid with tension. "Close the door," he said, without turning around. She did, then stood waiting, her heart hammering in her chest. "Sit down, Maeve." The formal use of her name sent ice through her veins. When he finally turned to face her, his expression was carefully controlled, but she could see the storm beneath the surface. "James Patterson just paid me a very interesting visit," Dominic said, his voice deadly quiet. "What kind of visit?" "The kind where he expressed concern about inappropriate workplace relationships. The kind where he mentioned rumors circulating about my relationship with my assistant." Dominic's green eyes were hard as glass. "The kind where he made it very clear that he has information that could be damaging to both of us." Maeve's mouth went dry. "What kind of information?" "Photos, Maeve. Photos of us leaving restaurants together. Of you entering my building on evenings when I was also there. Of us looking intimate." He moved closer, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "He's been having us followed." That's insane. Why would he?" "Because James has been waiting for an opportunity to leverage something against me, and we handed him the perfect weapon." The implications crashed over her like a cold wave. "What does he want?" "A promotion. VP of Strategic Operations, with a seat on the board, and complete discretion about certain personnel decisions he'd like to make." "Personnel decisions?" Dominic's expression darkened further. "He wants you gone, Maeve. Not just transferred, terminated, with a severance package that includes a very comprehensive non-disclosure agreement. He's blackmailing you, blackmailing us." "Very effectively, yes." Maeve sank into the chair across from his desk, her legs suddenly unsteady. "So what do we do?" "We don't do anything. I handle this." "What does that mean?" Dominic was quiet for a long moment, his jaw working as he struggled with whatever decision he was making. "It means I give him what he wants," he said finally. "You're going to fire me?" The words came out as barely a whisper. "I'm going to protect you. There's a difference." "No, there isn't." Maeve shot to her feet, anger flooding through her. "You're going to let him win. You're going to let him destroy what we have. What we have is already destroyed." Dominic's control finally cracked, his voice rising. "Don't you see that? We tried to have both things, our relationship and our professional lives, and it was naive to think we could pull it off. So you're giving up just like that?" "I'm being realistic. James isn't going away, and if we don't handle this quietly, it gets worse, much worse. He could take this to the board, to the media. Your reputation would be destroyed not just here but everywhere. Is that what you want?" "What I want is for you to fight for us." "I am fighting for us. I'm trying to minimize the damage by throwing me away." Tears were burning her eyes now, but she refused to let them fall. Just like Marcus did. Just like everyone does when things get complicated. The comparison hit Dominic like a physical blow. His face went white. "I'm not throwing you away. I'm trying to protect yourself. You're protecting yourself and your company. I'm just collateral damage. That's not fair, and you know it." "Do I?" "Because from where I'm standing, it looks like the moment things got difficult, you chose your career over me, just like I was afraid you would." They stared at each other across the sudden chasm that had opened between them, both breathing hard, both clearly devastated. "So what now?" Maeve asked, her voice hollow. "I pack my desk and pretend none of this ever happened? I'll make sure you're taken care of. Full salary for 6 months, excellent references, help finding a position somewhere." "Stop." Maeve held up her hand. "Just stop. Don't make this about money or references. If you're ending this, just end it." "Maeve, no. If you've made your choice, then I've made mine." She moved toward the door, then paused without turning back. I thought you were different, Dominic. I thought you were brave enough to fight for something real, but you're just like every other powerful man who decides that love is dispensable when it threatens what really matters to him. You know that's not true. Do I? Because you just proved it is. She left his office without another word, walking past Carmen's concerned gaze and heading straight for the ladies' room where she could finally let the tears fall. Behind her, through the glass walls of his office, Dominic stood motionless, watching the best thing that had ever happened to him walk away, knowing he was letting it happen and hating himself for being too much of a coward to stop it. But sometimes, he told himself, letting go was the only way to keep someone safe, even if it destroyed you both in the process. Carmen found Maevy in the bathroom 20 minutes later, sitting on the small bench by the windows, tissues scattered around her like fallen snow. Honey, what happened? Through her tears, Maevy told her everything, about the relationship, about James Patterson's blackmail, about Dominic's decision to end things rather than fight. That absolute fool, Carmen said when the story was finished. Both of them. Patterson for being a manipulative snake, and Brown for being too scared to fight for what he wants. Maybe he's right, Maevy said miserably. Maybe we were naive to think we could make this work. Or maybe you just found out who the real Dominic Brown is when things get tough. Carmen hugged her friend tightly. Either way, you deserve better than someone who runs at the first sign of trouble. As they sat together in the quiet bathroom, Maevy realized that Carmen was right. She did deserve better. She deserved someone who would fight for their love, not sacrifice it the moment it became inconvenient. The question was whether she was strong enough to walk away from the only man she'd ever truly loved, even if he'd already walked away from her. 3 days of misery had taught Dominic Brown that being right didn't always mean being smart. He sat in his office Friday evening, staring at the resignation letter Maevy had submitted that morning. 2 lines. Professional. Cold. Nothing like the warm, vibrant woman who had turned his carefully ordered world upside down. Please accept this letter as my formal resignation from my position as executive assistant, effective immediately. Thank you for the opportunity to work with Sterling Corporation. Monsieur Lewis. No Maevy. No personal touch. Just the kind of formal distance that felt like a knife between his ribs. The office felt hollow without her presence. No warm smile when he emerged from meetings. No gentle reminders about lunch or coffee that needed refilling. No stolen glances that made even the most tedious board meetings bearable. He'd told himself he was protecting her, that letting James Patterson win this battle was a strategic retreat that would preserve both their reputations and give them a chance to be together somewhere down the line when the attention died down. But sitting here in the growing darkness, surrounded by the success he'd thought mattered more than anything else, Dominic finally admitted the truth to himself. He'd been a coward. A soft knock interrupted his brooding. Carmen stood in the doorway, holding a coffee cup and wearing an expression that could have frozen hell over. Mr. Brown, could I have a word? Of course. Come in. Carmen closed the door behind her and set the coffee on his desk with more force than necessary. That's from Maevy, she said without preamble. She made it this morning before she cleaned out her desk. Black, no sugar in the blue mug, just like you like it. Dominic stared at the cup, his chest tightening painfully. Even in her anger and hurt, Maevy had thought of him. Carmen, no sir, you don't get to talk right now, you get to listen. Carmen crossed her arms, her usual friendly demeanor replaced by fierce protectiveness. Do you have any idea what you've done to that woman? I was trying to protect her. From what? From love? From happiness? From the best thing that ever happened to either of you? From James Patterson. From scandal. From having her reputation destroyed. Her reputation? Carmen's laugh was sharp and disbelieving. Mr. Brown, with all due respect, Maevy Lewis doesn't need you to protect her reputation. She needs you to stand up for what you both want instead of rolling over the minute someone threatens you. It's not that simple, isn't it? You love her. She loves you. Everything else is just noise. Dominic leaned back in his chair, running both hands through his hair. You don't understand the complexities. I understand that you're a brilliant businessman who's acting like an idiot when it comes to the most important decision of your life. Carmen leaned forward, her voice softening slightly. That woman spent the last 3 days crying over you. Not because she lost her job. She can get another job. Because she lost the man she thought was brave enough to fight for their love. Fighting would have made everything worse. For who? For your image? For your shareholders? Or for James Patterson? Carmen shook her head in disgust. Maevy was right about you. When things got tough, you chose the easy path. There was nothing easy about it. Then why did you do it? The simple question hung in the air between them. Dominic found himself without an answer that didn't make him sound like exactly what Carmen was accusing him of being, a coward who'd chosen convenience over courage. "Where is she now?" he asked quietly. "Packing. She's flying home to Philadelphia tomorrow morning. Says she needs time to figure out what comes next." "She's leaving New York? Can you blame her? This city is full of memories of you, of what you two had, of what you threw away." Carmen stood to leave, then paused at the door. "You know what the saddest part is, Mr. Brown? I actually thought you were different. I thought you were the kind of man who would move heaven and earth for the woman he loved. But you're just like all the rest. Brave in boardrooms, coward in love." After she left, Dominic sat alone with the coffee Maeve had made him and the devastating truth of Carmen's words. He'd built his entire life on taking calculated risks, on fighting for what he wanted, on never backing down from a challenge. Except when it came to the one thing that actually mattered. His phone buzzed with a text from James Patterson. "Pleasure doing business with you, Dominic. The board will be pleased with my promotion announcement Monday." Dominic stared at the message, feeling something shift inside him. Something that had been dormant for 3 days suddenly roared to life. He wasn't going to let James Patterson win. More importantly, he wasn't going to let fear cost him the only woman he'd ever truly loved. It took him exactly 47 minutes to drive across Manhattan to Maeve's apartment building. He'd been there once before, weeks ago, when she'd forgotten important files and he'd volunteered to drive them to her. He'd waited in the car that night, respecting her boundaries. Tonight he was done respecting boundaries that kept them apart. The doorman recognized him from previous flower deliveries and waved him through. Dominic took the stairs 2 at a time to the 4th floor, his heart pounding with something that felt like desperation and determination in equal measure. He knocked on her door. No answer. He knocked again, harder this time. "Maeve, I know you're in there. Please. Just give me 5 minutes." Silence. "I was wrong," he called through the door, not caring if her neighbors heard. "I was scared and stupid and wrong. Please let me explain." More silence. "I love you," he said, his voice breaking slightly. "I love you more than I love my company, more than I love my reputation, more than I love my own safety. And I should have said that 3 days ago instead of letting fear make my decisions for me." He heard the lock turn. The door opened to reveal Maeve, and Dominic's heart nearly stopped. She looked exhausted, her beautiful dark eyes red-rimmed from crying, her natural hair pulled back in a messy bun. She wore an old college sweatshirt and pajama pants, and she was the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen. 5 minutes, she said quietly, stepping aside to let him in. Her apartment looked different than he remembered. Half-packed boxes sat on the coffee table. Pictures had been taken down from the walls. It looked like someone preparing to flee. "You're really leaving," he said. "There's nothing left for me here." "There's me." "Is there?" Maeve crossed her arms, her expression guarded. "Because 3 days ago you made it very clear that your career was more important than our relationship. I was trying to protect you. From what? From being happy, from being loved." Her voice was steady, but he could hear the pain underneath. "Dominic, I've been abandoned before. I know what it feels like when someone decides I'm not worth fighting for. I just never thought you'd be the one to make me feel that way again. You are worth fighting for. You're worth everything. Then why didn't you fight?" It was the same question Carmen had asked, and this time Dominic had an answer. "Because I was terrified," he said simply. "Terrified that if I fought and lost, I'd lose you anyway. Terrified that James Patterson would destroy not just our careers, but any chance we had of being together in the future. Terrified that you'd realize I wasn't worth all the complications. So you decided to lose me preemptively?" "I decided to be a coward, and I've regretted it every second since." Maeve was quiet for a long moment, studying his face as if trying to determine whether his words were genuine. "What's changed?" she asked finally. "What's different now? I realize that losing you isn't protecting you. It's destroying us both. I realize that I'd rather face James Patterson and the board and whoever else wants to come after us than spend another day without you." He stepped closer, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "I realize that love isn't something you compromise on or sacrifice for convenience. It's something you fight for, even when the odds are terrible. And James Patterson can go to hell. I'm not giving him the promotion. I'm not playing his games, and if he wants to take his photos to the board or the media, then we'll face it together." "Together? If you'll have me, if you'll give me another chance to prove that I'm the man you thought I was instead of the coward I became." Tears were sliding down Maeve's cheeks now, and Dominic had to resist the urge to reach out and wipe them away. "I love you," he continued, his voice raw with emotion. "I love your smile and your kindness, and the way you make me want to be better than I am. I love that you see past the CEO facade to the man underneath. I love that you made coffee for me, even when you were angry enough to never speak to me again." He took a shaky breath. "And I'm done being afraid of what that means. Dominic, marry me." The words fell into the space between them, like stones dropped into still water. "What? Marry me, Maeve. Not someday when things are easier or less complicated. Now soon. Let's stop hiding what we have and start celebrating it. You're proposing to me in my apartment while I'm wearing pajamas, and you don't even have a ring. I'm proposing to you because I can't imagine spending another day without knowing you're mine and I'm yours, officially and completely." He dropped to one knee right there on her living room carpet. "I don't have a ring because I've been an idiot for 3 days. But I have a heart that belongs completely to you and a future that's meaningless without you in it." Maeve stared down at him, tears streaming freely now. "This is crazy," she whispered. "Good crazy or bad crazy? Terrifying crazy? Wonderful crazy? The kind of crazy that changes everything. Is that a yes?" Maeve was quiet for so long that Dominic's heart started to sink. Then she dropped to her knees in front of him, cupping his face in her hands. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, it's a yes to all of it, to marrying you and fighting together, and being brave enough to choose love over fear." When he kissed her, it felt like coming home and starting an adventure all at the same time. It felt like the beginning of something that would be complicated and challenging, and absolutely worth every obstacle they'd have to face. "I love you, Maeve Lewis," he murmured against her lips. "I love you too, Dominic Brown, even when you're being an idiot. Especially when I'm being an idiot. Especially then." As they held each other on the floor of her half-packed apartment, both knew that Monday morning would bring new challenges. James Patterson wouldn't go down without a fight. There would be board meetings and difficult conversations and probably more complications than they could imagine, but they'd face it all together. And sometimes, when you found the right person, that was enough to conquer anything. 1 year later, the morning sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of their Brooklyn brownstone, casting golden light across the kitchen where Maeve stood making coffee. She still smiled every time she prepared 2 cups instead of 1. A year and a half had passed since that desperate night when Dominic had shown up at her apartment and changed everything with a proposal that had no ring but carried all the love in the world. 15 months since they'd stood before their families and friends in a small ceremony in Central Park. Carmen, serving as maid of honor, and even Patricia Lewis, crying happy tears as her daughter married the man who'd proven himself worthy of her love. 13 months since James Patterson had been terminated for corporate espionage and attempting to blackmail a board member, because it turned out that Dominic Brown, when properly motivated, was absolutely ruthless in protecting what mattered most to him. "Good morning, Mrs. Brown," a familiar voice murmured behind her. Strong arms wrapped around her waist, and Maeve leaned back into Dominic's embrace, marveling as she did every morning at how perfectly she fit against him. "Good morning, Mr. Brown," she replied, turning in his arms to accept his kiss. Even after all this time, the simple contact sent warmth spreading through her chest. "Sleep well?" "Better than well." She handed him his coffee, black, no sugar, in the blue ceramic mug that had somehow become a symbol of their entire relationship. "You? Best sleep of my life. Same as every night since you started sharing my bed." Maeve laughed, the sound bright and unreserved in their sun-filled kitchen. "Flatterer?" "Truth-teller," he corrected, settling onto one of the bar stools to watch her move around their kitchen with the easy familiarity of home. Their kitchen, their home, their life. The brownstone had been Dominic's wedding gift to her, not because she needed him to provide for her, but because he'd wanted them to start their marriage in a space that belonged to both of them, somewhere that had no history of corporate complications or workplace tensions, somewhere they could simply be Maeve and Dominic, husband and wife. "What's the plan for today?" Maeve asked, though she already knew. Saturdays had become sacred in their household. No work calls, no business emergencies, just time for each other and the life they were building together. Farmer's market, then that new museum exhibit you wanted to see, then dinner with your mother. Dominic grinned over his coffee cup. "She's bringing her famous pot roast." "You don't have to sound so excited about it." "Are you kidding? Your mother's pot roast is the stuff of legends. Plus, she promised to show me more embarrassing childhood photos of you." "Traitor," Maeve accused, but she was smiling. Patricia Lewis had fallen completely in love with her son-in-law, especially after he'd handled the media attention around their engagement with such grace and dignity that even the nosiest society reporters had eventually moved on to more scandalous stories. The fact that he genuinely enjoyed her company and remembered every story she told him hadn't hurt either. "Speaking of your mother," Dominic said casually, "she asked when we might be thinking about giving her grandchildren." Maeve nearly choked on her coffee. "She did not. She absolutely did. Last Sunday, right after you went to get dessert. Very direct question, actually. I respect that about her." "What did you tell her?" "That we're taking things one day at a time and enjoying being newlyweds." His green eyes sparkled with mischief. "But I also told her she should probably start thinking about what kind of grandmother she wants to be." Dominic Brown. "What?" "We've talked about wanting kids, and you'd be an amazing mother. Someday, when we're ready." "When we're ready," he agreed, reaching across the counter to take her hand. "No rush. We have all the time in the world." As they sat together in comfortable silence, Maeve reflected on how much had changed since that accidental photo that started everything. She'd eventually returned to work, not as Dominic's assistant, but as the executive director of strategic development at Goldman Sachs, one of the most prestigious positions on Wall Street. The job was challenging, high-profile, and completely separate from Dominic's business world, which had been exactly what they both needed. Her expertise in corporate operations and her natural leadership skills had made her one of the youngest executives in the company's history. Carmen had been promoted to executive assistant to the CEO and took every opportunity to remind Dominic that she'd been right about everything from the beginning. She'd also become one of their closest friends and the undisputed queen of their dinner parties. "Penny for your thoughts," Dominic said, squeezing her hand gently. "Just thinking about how different everything is now. How much better. Any regrets?" Maeve considered the question seriously. The past year hadn't been without challenges. Learning to navigate marriage while both maintaining demanding careers had required patience and compromise. There had been long nights of difficult conversations, moments of doubt, adjustments that tested both their individual strength and their partnership. But regrets? "Not a single one," she said firmly. "You? Only that I didn't fight for us sooner, that I wasted even 3 days being afraid when I could have been loving you instead. We both learned something important from those 3 days." "What's that?" "That love isn't just about the feeling. It's about the choice to keep choosing each other, especially when things get difficult." Dominic stood and moved around the counter, pulling her into his arms properly. "I choose you, Maeve Brown," he said solemnly, as if they were renewing their vows right there in their kitchen. "Today and every day, in boardrooms and bedrooms, in good times and complications, in coffee shops and farmers' markets, and everywhere in between. I choose you too," she whispered back, her arms winding around his neck. "Always." As they kissed in their sun-drenched kitchen, surrounded by the life they'd built together through courage and stubbornness, and an accidental photo that had turned out to be the best mistake either of them had ever made, Maeve knew with absolute certainty that some love stories were worth fighting for, and some people were worth risking everything to keep. The best part? Their story was just beginning. Later, as they walked hand in hand through the farmer's market, Dominic's phone buzzed with a text. Without thinking, he glanced at it, then stopped walking so suddenly that Maeve bumped into him. "What is it?" she asked. He showed her the screen. It was a photo from Carmen, a selfie of her and her new boyfriend at brunch, both of them grinning widely. The caption read, "Learned from the best. Sometimes the most beautiful accidents lead to the most beautiful love stories. Thank you for showing me what it looks like to fight for someone worth fighting for." Maeve laughed, remembering her own accidental photo that had started everything. "Should we tell her that the best love stories usually begin with the bravest mistakes?" Dominic asked. "I think she's figuring that out on her own," Maeve replied, leaning up to kiss her husband's cheek. "But maybe we should invite them to dinner next weekend. You know, share some wisdom about navigating love in the modern world." "Mrs. Brown," Dominic said with a grin that still made her heart skip, "I think you have an excellent idea." As they continued through the market, choosing fresh flowers and vegetables for their evening with Patricia, both of them knew that the best parts of their story were still being written. One day, one choice, one moment of courage at a time. Your participation means a lot to the channel. Please share your thoughts in the comments. What did this story teach you about taking chances on love, even when it seems impossible? Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel leave a like, and comment your thoughts. Your participation is very important to us. See you next time.